Thank you so much for coming forward. Really appreciate that. You should take the pictures from the side so it looks full. Anyway, thank you guys for joining us. My name is Ravita Vidor. I'm a founding partner at Lighthouse Ventures. And I have here today with me Matt and Lukáš that will present themselves very soon. Today, the topic of the event is doing business in times of economic slowdown. I guess that slowdown is the most popular word we hear today in the news, in the economic news. We hear it everywhere. We feel it already. And you know, there are pessimistic outlooks about what's going to be, and we want to be prepared for what's ahead of us. And I guess this is the purpose of today's event. So I will start the event by asking our two speakers to present themselves. You have one, okay. Matt, you want to start? I don't know.
That's better, I think. Yeah, hi. Matt from Mews. We're a hospitality platform. So if you ever walk into a hotel and you stand in a queue at a reception desk, we are the system that the reservation agent or the front office agent is ferociously typing into while she's ignoring you. And we're trying to change that whole experience that you have when you come to the hotel. So in our business model, we make money from software as a service, so we charge per room per month. So if you're a typical 50-bedroom hotel, we'll charge 10 euros per room per month, 500 euros. And then we add fintech on top. So we transact the payments. Are you hearing? Hello? Yeah, I think that's it. So we make money on the SaaS, and then we add payments on top. So whenever you transact a credit card at a hotel, we take a fee of that because we completely automate that whole cycle from check-in to check-out and every payment that happens in between. And that's now 2/3 of our revenue. So that's in short what we do.
Thank you. Lukáš?
Good evening. Hello. So my name is Lukáš. In the past, I did a couple of things. The most visible were I was managing Zoot during the insolvency, and it was like the insolvency there started about 3 or 4 years ago, and I was there then for the 2 years. And before that, a couple of years back, I was leading Dáme jídlo, which were acquired by Delivery Hero, which is the global #1 in the field. And I spent some time. Almost a year in Germany, UK, Sweden, and other markets, building the fleet of drivers, which similar to the one we had here in the Czech Republic. And now, about a year ago, when a Czech fashion brand, Pietro Filippi, went under, when it did bankrupt, a lot of money was owed. There were a lot of creditors that were unhappy, and we managed to make a deal with the insolvency administrator and the leading creditor to take over all the merchandise, all the stock, and start to sell it to the end customers. So I spent the last year monetizing the old stock of Pietro Filippi, and it seems that we've managed, first of all, to do the job, and it actually made some money for the creditors. And now we've decided to try to revive one location and not to have it as an outlet store that will close down soon, but as an ongoing business that will actually be able to make some money going forward.
So you're really a crisis expert by now.
Yeah, it was not planned, but it just happened, yeah.
Matt, can you just speak about the crisis or the times that your company went through COVID, I guess?
Yeah. So we're in hospitality, and we're probably the worst hit industry from the pandemic. So pre-pandemic, we had scaled our company very rapidly. We had just closed our Series B in 2019, and we raised about 30 million. So we started building our sales teams. We had hired about 450 employees. And in February of 2020, we had a big party here in Prague, and we were celebrating the exciting year that we were having. And then in March, we laid off half of those people. We had to let go of 220 people very quickly because when that pandemic hit, the whole industry shut down. At the worst of it, we serve today 3,000 hotels, but at the time it was 1,500 hotels. but 70% of those hotels shut down, physically shut down by governments, and they couldn't operate. They had no revenue, so we made no fintech money, and we didn't know whether the SaaS customers were going to stay with us. So you very quickly go into crisis mode because we were burning through €1.5 million every single month, euros, and we had 12 million in the bank. So we like, right, if that goes up by €1 million because our fintech revenue disappears, suddenly we'll start burning €2.5 million a month. That gives us 4 or 5 months, and then we're dead. And I'm not going back to Hilton where I came from. So then you very quickly say, okay, what do we need to do to get through 2 years of crisis? We knew everyone at that time was saying, Dr. Fauci was already saying 2 years, and no one believed it. But we said, let's go for 2 years. And then it's an Excel sheet exercise. You go in and say, we want to make 12 million last 2 years. We've got ridiculous leases everywhere. Champs-Élysées, you've got Barcelona, Sydney, Munich, New York. We had offices everywhere, and we had to get out of the leases. We had to let go of people in 12 countries, which is impossible.
We'll go into the details very soon, one by one. But yes, also a crisis expert by now, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, no, I've lived through it now.
Okay, no, we're all here to learn.
I love a recession because it's not as bad as a pandemic at this point.
Well, we'll see. That's part of what we're going to discuss today. Yeah, so really the first question that I would like to discuss is, do we really having a crisis? I mean, everybody says slow down. We see that VC sending emails to their startups, tighten up, companies laying off people. That's what we see in the news. It could be that it's really a crisis, and it could be that the market is just correcting, because their valuation were quite crazy in the past couple of years, and every time that we thought that, okay, we're hitting the ceiling, it's getting higher and higher. So maybe the market is just correcting and it's not crisis. That's the first thing that I would like to hear your opinion about. And secondly, obviously, I guess as people that managing companies, you're not relying on the news when you decided whether your organization is in crisis or not. So what are the indicators? Where should we feel the pulse of whether a crisis is starting or not?
I don't know. Like, all the signs are pointing towards a recession next year. So we've just at the tail end of our Series C. We launched our Series C 2 months ago, and I've lived through the worst 2 months of my life. It was actually so depressing to be out trying to raise money when you have a fantastically successful business. We came out of the pandemic like roaring. Like, our numbers are insane. Like, we grew by €1 million in monthly recurring revenue month on month. And then you go out to investors and they're like, we've been told pens down. No one signs deals at this point. Unless you are the one category leader in the space, then we'll look at it, but we'll give you a crap valuation for it. So like, I wouldn't recommend anyone raising money if you don't have to. Like, if you have cash and you can preserve it, I would say preserve it for 2 years to get as far as you can out of this crisis. But it is a correction, right? Like, some of the valuations, there was companies with 30, 40 time multipliers on their annual recurring revenue, which is insane. Like, a SaaS business should be around 10x. And I think it's definitely corrected to that level. Some of them below it, especially I think fintech businesses have been hit a lot worse than SaaS businesses. And because we do 2/3 of our revenue from fintech, it's been a heavy debate. But it feels like a recession is definitely coming.
And when it started with the COVID, when did you realize that that there is a crisis? I mean, was it like, okay, you were just you're hearing the news, nobody knew what's going to happen. So when were you sitting and saying, like, actually, yes, it's hitting us?
So 13th of March, I think, was Donald Trump's speech of
really
closing the borders. And the 14th of March, all the revenue disappeared. Like, you see this plummet of revenue because hotels, everyone canceled, right? And you just didn't know what was happening. It was this bizarre period of 3 months where you're like, I don't know, I don't want to get this disease. I'm going to lock myself in my house. Everyone canceled. Like, it was this absolute shit show. And we felt it overnight. So by that weekend, when we hit the Friday, we called our leadership in on a Saturday and said, we've decided we're going to cut heavily. We're going to cut really, really deep. And we want to do that once. We don't want to do multiple cuts. So let's just go for the bone. And we went as deep as we could. But it was instant for us.
So it was abrupt.
Yeah.
With you, was it more gradual, or it was like similar? You came actually to a business that was already in crisis when you joined, right?
Yes. So Zoot was developing very nicely in the past with insane valuations, which incentivized everyone to grow even more and raise even more money in order to grow. And at one point in the very past, before the crisis, they've decided to raise debt instead of equity, meaning you go to investors not to ask for equity money, meaning they share the risk, but only for debt. So you have to repay it, but you don't have to share the upside. So in the very past, Zoot raised debt instead of equity with stellar growth, but not working business model. So the company was losing money on every T-shirt it sold at a time. And at one point, long before COVID, at one point the company needed some additional capital. And but the growth was still great, but not so great, and the economics didn't work, and there was a lot of debt on the balance sheet. And when at the time all the investors looked at the company and said, "Not for me," and the company started like they didn't have then any cash very soon, and they started to increase that even more, meaning going to the business partners and saying, "I'll definitely pay you. Just send me some new products, some new merchandise. Don't worry, I'm going to pay you." And the same across the board. So the company increased that significantly, like all of a sudden. And then everyone hoped that somehow it will turn around, the winds will start to blow the right direction again, but it didn't happen. And at one point, there was a lot of debt towards one bank in Czech, and they've decided to pull the plug. And they've started to seize all the money that came to the bank account, and they've sent the I don't know the English word for it, but the guy from the government or the official guy that can take possession of your products, executor in Czech. So they've sent him to the warehouse, and at that point it was like over, and the company went into the insolvency mode, and I've joined to solve that. And what happened is we need to secure, like, first of all, the company needed to decide that it's actually going to go through the insolvency in the formal process. Like, at the time, I didn't understand how it works at all. I knew that the law regarding insolvency is really complicated and really long, and like several people tried to explain it to me several times, and I still didn't get it. Like, there was all of the nitty-gritties that I didn't understand, but like everyone was saying, like, this is the only option. So we had to learn it, and we found the investor that was specializing in distressed asset situations. And there was a lot of like insane amount of work on the legal and the structure, the creditors, like who is the creditor, who owes, like resolving all the structure. But it happened. But after a year, during this insolvency process, we had to cost cut significantly. When I started there, it was like 700 or 800 people working there, and then a year later it was like 200. So it went down significantly. All the whole cost base. We've changed what the company sells and through what channels. A lot of changes. But then a year later, when things were starting to look a little bit better, COVID came, and then, like, I remember the moment I was sitting in a restaurant with someone talking about like future cooperation, and then I read on my cell phone that the government shut down all the businesses in Czech. And like I went back to the office, and I had a special dashboard that showed me the revenues in that specific day. So in the morning I saw something there, and then I don't know, 12 p.m. I looked like what was the revenue before the noon, and there was a sharp spike down. Like, it was like there was some revenue, and then when the government shut down everything, it was like almost to zero. And like no one knew what's going to happen. We read the news like what's going to happen in China, and I got really nervous at the time. And so we have decided to act very, very fast. I've heard that you decided to act very fast. I think this is one of the key lessons. Like, this is something that needs to happen. Like, you have to act fast. And we started to do yet another wave of cost cutting, and this one was painful. The ones before, like, we have managed to explain to people that it's needed and what's the future going to be like. And like cost cutting or any transformation or any crisis, solving the crisis is never only about the hard measures like letting people go and change the mechanics of the business. It's always about the vision and making sure that people, in the employees and on the market and business partners, they believe in that vision. And I think we've managed to do that in the past, but when the COVID came, like we were out of the bullets. Like no one knew what's going to happen, and we didn't have any new vision or how to like put it on. And there was too much pain in the past, and we have used too much of the goodwill. So this one cost cut was very rough, even for myself, and but it needed to happen, and actually there is a lot of opportunities in every crisis, and here it was also. So.
Yeah, we were going to touch on the opportunities, but okay. So now both of you, for both of you, it was quite abrupt. You entered the crisis. The crisis happened overnight, but now you're managing companies, and you know that a crisis is going to come, another crisis. How do you prepare better? What do you say? Okay. What do you do differently today after when you know that a slowdown is coming? What do you do differently today to make sure that it doesn't hit you like it hit you before?
So it's not as striking as a pandemic, which hits overnight, and a recession. Like it's a slow-moving beast that it's been now 6 months into the year, and it started in really early in the year. So you need to really think about what are the metrics that matters, and growth is nice. But growth for the sake of growth is not the metric to go after anymore, because you need to run a healthy business. So what we're doing is we're trying to diversify the metrics that we care about. So margin is actually really, really critical. Gross profit, LTV to CAC ratios, making sure that all these metrics line up. Because in the end, if any of them are unhealthy, you won't be able to raise money. And we found this in the raising process. They will look, the revenue gets you in the door. So you must have revenue growth. If you don't have revenue growth, you've got a problem. But then once they open the books and they start looking at the other metrics, they need to all line up as well. You can't just have revenue growth at a very unhealthy level. It needs to be balanced revenue growth. And I think that's really been the biggest lesson that we've had. Like we actually have really balanced revenue growth. Like what's your net revenue retention? It's a number that took us a long time to really nail because it's so complex. But it's a metric that shows you land a customer and then you grow that customer. And that's a metric that has to be really core to your business. So just know your metrics beyond just revenue if you run a business, but also know you have to make a guess. What's your run rates, right? If you have cash in the balance sheet, it's going to take 2 years minimum, right? If this is going to hit us, it's going to take 2 years, if not 3 years. So do you want to go through that entire period with the cash that you have? Well, then do a backwards calculation and say, plan it out. Do a proper budget that plans out how you're going to burn through the cash. Is there a debt facility that you can access? That's always great. But maybe you need to raise money. So then plan towards the moment that you're raising money and where you want your metrics to be. So if you say, I'm going to raise in next year, January, and we're aiming for this revenue, but you need to also know what your margin, your profit margin will be on that revenue. What's your cost of acquisition? What's your lifetime value of the customers? And work towards hitting those numbers, because then you'll be in the healthiest possible way to raise money. It will not be perfect. You'll not be happy with the valuation, but at least you'll be in the best position for it.
So in the balance between growth and crisis management, you say, okay, count on what you have today, and just there's going to be slowdown in the growth, but you will be able to survive through it. That's on the financial side. What about employees? I mean, do you tell your teams, guys, we're not hiring people right now until we know what's going, or every new hire goes through me or through, I don't know, is there anything like that?
Not for us. We're hiring aggressively, which is a little bit terrifying, to be honest, but like we're going through an incredible recovery of an industry. So our growth is there. So we're adding 30, 40 jobs every single month that we're bringing into the company. But we are talking about when do we hit profitability. So we had aimed for profitability at the end of 2024. We're pulling that forward to 2023. And that means that down the line, we'll have to make some of these decisions, which are the positions we want to hire for. We want more salespeople, but do we really want to have more admin staff in the back office? Do we really need more recruiters? Probably not. So it's really thinking about, and it goes back to cash. Like in the end, everything is cash. Cash is king in a crisis, and then you just work backwards. Like your best friend right now needs to be your CFO. You know, it shouldn't be your R&D. It shouldn't be your sales. Your CFO is the one that's your best friend today.
Okay, so you're still hiring, but it needs to be direct to the growth of the company, salespeople versus exactly to the core metrics. And we will get back to the employees, but we have a few questions for Matt, also for Lukas. Matt, why fintech hit bigger than SaaS? You mentioned this before.
So we started as a SaaS company, and we just ran into this problem of, you know, in an Uber, you walk out and somehow that transaction is done, you get a receipt in your inbox. And we got into the SaaS business, and all these companies wanted to send us credit card numbers. And we're like, we don't want to touch your credit card numbers. But we had to, because in a hotel, it's the thing that you do. We're the core system of the hotel. So we very quickly, it took us a few years to figure this out. But we found Stripe and Adyen, and we built a model based on them. And then it just started growing really rapidly. We mark up a transaction by about 0.6%. So if you think a typical transaction in a hotel is 220 euros, so that it adds up really quickly. And then first you deploy it, and then you get like 30% adoption, and then you build more automation in, and you add terminals on top. And now in new hotels, we capture all of the credit card transactions. We've just bought a point of sale company so that the restaurant revenue also now goes through the Mews books. So it just scaled beyond where we could even ever have dreamed where it would be. And then now the problem on the fintech side is that the margin isn't healthy. It's a fintech margin, so it's much lower than what we see in a SaaS margin. And we don't get the multipliers on like we get on the SaaS business. So we're like, how do we pull the margin up? And now you get the transactions in at the top through the revenue. The next direction is we're getting our own payment license in the Netherlands. So we're in that process. And then we're building our own fintech product on top of it. So like we're looking at payroll, for example. So if I could process the payroll of these hotels, I can make margin on paying out these payrolls, and I can issue credit cards to employees and pay them on there. And again, I can recycle some of that revenue, and that drives the margin up. So the fintech part is actually something that none of our competitors have done. And it's made us the breakout products. Like it's become our Trojan horse. We come in, customers come to buy a SaaS product, and we're like, absolutely, but you cannot get the SaaS without the fintech. And our revenues are triple that of our competitors, and we've been able to raise way more money than anyone else, and that's just, you know, Trojan horse.
Alex, does it answer your question? Yep. Okay, cool. I think that the second question, I think you already answered. Why you calculate the need to survive 2 years and not one, for instance? I guess you answered this.
We didn't want to race, yeah. Like we knew that the pandemic was going to take 2 years, and our industry was on its ass at the moment. So we're like, let's go with the worst case scenario so that we're safe for the 2 years, because you also don't want to raise when, like we assumed that there was going to be a recession at that time. We're like, first the pandemic, and then it's going to be followed by a recession. And we wanted to be in this, like we're adamant that we want to control the majority of the business. We've always done that. So we just did not want to raise money in a downtime. Unfortunately, we've now had to because the recession is way worse than we ever thought. But it's just we tried to make it last as long as possible. And we timed it perfectly. So in April, which is in 1st of May, which is when we went out to the market, we had just come off Easter. So we had this full rebound after Omicron. Our numbers could not be better at this point. Like it's very exciting. If I look at that P&L, it excites the hell out of me. Unfortunately, the markets are opposite to where we are. But we had always timed, we needed to get through Easter because that's when hospitality has reopened. And that was the time that we calculated back from.
By the way, I think that it would be easier to raise money now than in a few months from now. Yes. Yeah, so if you really need the money, it's actually better to do it earlier than later, I guess. But better not to need the money right now. Yeah, until we raise the new fund at least. We exhausted our first fund. So now to Lukas. You, Matt, can relax, have a drink. Well, Lukas is taking a question. Lukáš, sorry. Could you also give some numbers? What does CAT mean? How many employees, stores, cities, and so on?
Sure. Like it's been about 70% of the cost base, or 65 or 70% of the cost base, and that were decreased. And one of the biggest changes were in the distribution model. In the past, majority of the volume went through it was called try and buy store, like the physical location where when you ordered online, you had it sent to a physical store that belonged to the company, and people could try it on and only take what they liked, only pay for what they liked. And this model was very, very, very expensive because there was rent and there was employee costs and the risk of utilization, like how much volume is actually going there. And this changed. Like I think right now there's no stores that belong directly to the company. It's all closed down from 40 to 0, and it was all replaced by a partner physical store. So you find a small retailer who specializes in fashion. He has 2 or 3 fitting rooms somewhere in the city center of whichever city, and basically the deal with him was to make it as zásilkovna with a fitting room, meaning the customer could order online, have it delivered over there, and company only paid to this small retailer for the volume that was picked up. So there was no fixed cost for the employees and rent and so on, and it scaled really well. Like you can scale it like 20, 30 locations per month easily. Opening a new store is 1 or 2 locations per month with half a year of lead time, and this changed, so it decreased the costs and increased the coverage, and it was one of the largest changes. I believe now there's like 150 locations like that from 40. So in the past it was expensive and it was only 40 places. Now it's cheaper and 150 places. So that's like part of the figures. But I would like to comment on more general on the crisis, and I'm probably one of like very few people who does not see the future so dim. And I think all this mess economically appeared during the COVID when a lot of companies and a lot of segments were closed down. So you don't produce the national product, but at the same time, all the governments subsidized heavily everyone. So people were getting money into their pockets. And I know from my experience, people around me, that for a lot of people, the whole COVID was very like cash flow positive. Compared to like normal situation. You don't have to work a lot or almost at all, and you get some money. And so people gotten the money and started to use it. So, and I remember a year and something ago, I was with one company who produces houses, like wooden houses. And they said, like, we are out of wood and wood is so expensive now. And I said, why? And like, no one knows. It's probably the consumption in the United States because people were getting some sort of subsidy to renovate or build new house. So the United States takes the wood from like the rest of the world. And so no one has it, and the prices went up. And basically, this is what happened in a lot of segments, so everywhere. The raw materials went up, the prices, and then all of a sudden the crisis or the changes in the distribution model propagated, and now the war in Ukraine. So it also like made all the havoc, especially with the oil price and so on. So, but I think fundamentally, I think the economic cycles are, the speed of economic cycles is increasing. That's one thing I believe. And also a lot of root cause of this trouble that we have now was in COVID times when government subsidized and the national product went down, which creates inflation by definition. So, and this is something that happened in the past and is not continuing at this point. We have war and that has effects, but I think bigger effect is what happened in the past during the COVID time. So I'm one of the few that believes that things might get a little worse for the next few months or so, but fundamentally, like midterm is not going to be that bad. That's what I believe. But at the same time, as they always say, like, hope for the best, plan for the worst. And I definitely 100% agree what Matt said regarding the building of the budget and incorporating the flexibility and knowing when are you going to raise money and what needs to happen between now and then, and how the company should look like. It's all valid. I would sign it like 100%. That's all true. But at the same time, yeah, it's changes are going to happen. But like when you only see clouds in the sky, you are never going to reap the crops and so on. So this is something that, like, it's good to be cautious and good to find ways how to diversify and limit the fixed costs and so on. But at the same time, it shouldn't prevent anyone from thinking about how to, like, proceed and develop and what is next and so on.
It's nice to hear it. I guess because you've been going through from one crisis to another crisis, you kind of, you know, to see the light.
I don't actually view it that way. Like, if you view it like anything in life, if you view a crisis as something bad, then you are not going to like it because it's bad. You are not going to like to engage with it, and it then doesn't help you. Like, I remember during my Zoot time, it was troublesome, but I was actually looking forward to go to work and do something. And I remember negotiating with the suppliers and everyone, like, we needed to change the deal, we needed to, like, decrease costs and prolong whatever. And I was looking forward to those negotiations, even though I knew it wouldn't be pleasant. But I don't like pleasant negotiations. Like, it's when it's just people chatting and I offer something and they accept it, it bores the hell out of me. But when there's a negotiation where it's, like, friendly but hard on the terms, like when you present the terms and the other side views it like that's impossible to do the deal now, that's when the real tension starts. This is what I love. And we had a lot of negotiations like that. I was looking forward to it. And when you have a crisis, and when you look forward, not that it, like, I don't mind solving it, but you have to actually look forward to use this opportunity, then you can be successful.
You're definitely in the right business for yourself.
Yeah, no, but like, I could not agree more. Like, initially you're like, oh, fuck, here we go again. But then if you're, like, I love a crisis. Like, I thrive in a crisis because suddenly it drives alignment in the company. Because when it's all green, everyone wants to do their projects and you're just, you know, everyone is winning, you're getting great valuations, you can raise lots of money. But we've done best when we didn't have money, when we had to make one decision. We couldn't have 5 things going at the same time. So I do agree, like, I love a crisis. And the way that we went in COVID, sure, it sucked. We had to lay off 220 people. But we also said, we're going to go up market, we're going to throw our money in R&D, and we're going to build an enterprise-grade product. And we will only hire the best talents. We will not settle for less. So we pulled out the most junior layer of the organization. We doubled down on hiring anywhere. We don't care where the talent is, as long as it's the absolute best talent we can find in Europe. And if I look back now, our employees carry double the amount of revenue than they did 2 years ago per employee. So it has driven a lot of the right decisions. And I think a recession will drive the right behaviors as well. You're building healthier businesses. Sure, the overinflated businesses, they're going to have to do a massive down round. Sucks for them. If you're building a healthy business, you'll have a natural trajectory that you're going up in. So it will definitely drive healthier businesses.
I agree with you. It's also a crisis is also an opportunity to be more efficient, to do changes that you wouldn't dare doing otherwise. Maybe it forces you to do some changes or accelerate changes that you wanted to do. You were talking about being more efficient with every employee. Any other things that you can think of, that any changes that you've taken because of the crisis you've been going through? Anything that you didn't dare doing before or were not thinking and it made you do and will stay longer with the company?
I have an example, not from Zoot, but from my current situation. And it's Pietro Filippi that failed a year and a half something ago, and stock remained, and like no company offered a decent amount of money for that stock as bulk. And so we came to the bank and the insolvency administrator with a proposal that we would take over the stock on consignment, do komise in Czech, and we would open 2 or 3 stores, start to sell it, and all the proceeds from all the net profit we would share to certain percentage would be shared with all the creditors. And it happened, like we managed to do that. And And then a year later, when most of the stock was sold out, we were like thinking, okay, in the next month or two, it's going to be sold out, and we would be about to close the business, both locations, because we wouldn't have anything else to sell. And it was like we didn't want to do that because it was working so nicely, and the teams were working so great. And so we said, okay, we need to find a way how to make it long term. But the trouble is, Pietro Filippi didn't work even before COVID. Like the company was losing about 20 million Czech crowns per year, even like long before COVID. And so there's no way of getting back to that model, and that model is that you had a designer who is sitting here in Prague, Holešovice, close to here actually, and who takes a piece of paper and draws some silhouette, like what are we going to produce for the next collection. And then some technology person and construction person will take it and create actually the dress or whatever. Then someone will make the sample. They will fit it and then buy the fabric somewhere and contract local manufacturing company to produce it. And it was long, costly process. And it doesn't make sense to do it for such a small brand as Pietro Filippi was, with 30 locations, 30 stores. And so we said we want to make sure that the company, that we are able to continue, but not in that model, so we need to find a different model. And I think the company should have done that, what we are doing now, because there is tremendous amount of brands and manufacturers everywhere. And if you don't produce or don't develop your own collections and go to someone who has already done it, because you cannot create anything new in this business. It's impossible to create any new dress or suit or anything because it's all been done, it's all been thought of, and someone somewhere has a design to do that. So you only need to find a couple of factories and brands that have what you want. You take their catalog, you take your finger and say, I want this, and I want 100 pieces or 500 pieces, whatever you want. You don't have to stick to 1,000 pieces that are in China, or if you want to contract locally and do everything yourself. And then it works. And we found some tremendous brands that are not here in Czech present at the time, or very limited, that have good margins, good buying conditions, and it might work. And I think if the company, Pietro Filippi, if they did it in the past and turned away from this 100% private brand into a combination of fitting right brands, maybe together with something private, with some private brand, but to less amount, I think it would have worked in the past. So company didn't do that because they didn't want to do that. And I'm a different company, but sort of we were forced to think that way because we want to keep this little store that we now have, we wanted to keep it, and this is the way. So I think this one of the examples that a crazy crisis, a death of a company caused, and now we are trying to capitalize on it.
Yeah, that's exactly the story I was expecting to hear about, how a crisis can be an opportunity, and it was an opportunity for them. I want to go back to the employees because I think this is a very sensitive topic. You had to lay off hundreds of people. You also had to cut on headcount massively. I guess everybody, all the people, every company gonna face it to a certain level, even if it's laying off 2 people out of a group of 5 or 220 out of 300. Can you tell us a little bit story from the battlefield? How was it? How do you, as a manager of a company, how do you cope with it? How do you communicate it? What about the employees that are staying? What about the 100 of hours of that you were qualifying these employees and actually living with them? Did you keep them connected to the company to call them back? Any of such insight?
We tried to be as human as we could about it, and I'm very open. I don't really have a filter, so I don't really know where to not share. So generally, we made the decision and we communicated to the company saying, unfortunately, COVID's happening. We're shutting down the regions, and we will keep 2 people in every territory, and we'll be working through that with the company. And it created, people were fearful, of course, and especially in that time because you didn't know if the government was going to support you in any way. So we did it in the nicest way possible. We paid them extra on what the minimum requirements coverage was. And then we consistently kept communicating. And when we were laying off people, I was always the face of it. I was fine with it. Like, as a top leader, you need to show up when people are being terminated. And in COVID times, I was in the office. Like, you couldn't really meet in person, but I wanted to be there in case people came into the office. And we placed a bunch of people on these government programs in all of the territories, but then they're sitting at home not knowing what was happening. So we kept doing communication meetings every month. So it's just over communicate. These people are in a strange position. They don't know what's happening. And we hear it now. We have all hands every week, and we're open. So you can ask us anything, even anonymous, and we'll answer it. And the questions are like, are there going to be layoffs? That's a weekly repeating question at the moment. And we're explaining that we're not expecting it because we're doing incredibly well. We'll raise money that will buy us 2 years. But it's important that you give the full context to the team so that you try and remove the fear. But it is an opportunity. Like in hindsight, I wish that we'd cut low talent sooner. And it's too easy when you're in the good times not to make those decisions. Like, we'll give them another month. We'll give them another month. No, those people are never gonna be an A player. They might go from a C to a B, but that's not good enough because you can probably hire an A player if you have the place available. The one thing we've learned is now we have a massive recruitment team. We've got 11 people full-time recruiting for us. And even if we don't have jobs available, they keep recruiting so that we have a pipeline available so that we can... sometimes you run into a person, I'm like, I'm not going to replace them because it will take us 6 months to replace them. And that's often the reason why we keep bad talents. And I want to make sure that we have a backlog of people that we can instantly swap out so that we will never have that as the excuse to keep low-performing people in the company.
But what about the good talent that stayed? I mean, you couldn't stand in front of them and say, okay, layoff is over. We're not laying off anybody. Because you did it.
We said we will cut once and we will cut deep, and that's it. And we really did say, we know what our cash burn needs to be to survive because our SaaS was stable. Our revenue was stable at this point. So we really did say, like, this is the one cut, and we're not planning any more cuts at this point. But it took us 6 months, like our EMPS, our Employee Net Promoter Score, we track it through Office Vibe, it plummeted. So we were around 55-60% EMPS, which is fantastic. It dropped to 19 at the worst of it. And then it took until like October, November that year. And I actually got on a call with the company. I was like, okay, get it. It's been tough. You got to snap out of it because you're here and we need you to get excited about the business because our customers are. And if you can't get around it, then go. And we really did have this wake up call, whereas like, it sucks. You lost your friends. They've moved on to different companies, but we're running a very successful business. And if you can't get back on that train, then get off it. And you do need to sometimes have that reality check.
100% agree, and I think communication is really key in this case. I mean, I experienced it. My background is in M&A, mergers and acquisition, and in many cases, when you do the integration, it comes with layoffs of some. You have overlaps, and it's very important to do it in one time, finish it, and then tell people, guys, that's it. We're not laying off any more people, because otherwise people say, okay, if you're doing it slowly, people think, okay, I'm next in line, and then the good people that you want to keep, these are, by the way, the first people that will be able to find a new job, and you don't want them to leave. So I totally agree with that from what I experienced in M&A. Lukáš, you want to add on this?
Sure, I remember more or less like a fun point, like when I was in Dáme jídlo and were acquired by Delivery Hero, they also acquired our local competitor, which was significantly smaller than us. And the decision was that we integrate, and like what you mentioned happened, like there's a redundancy list, which was like, and that competitor was like 10 times smaller than us. And it was previously owned by several people living in Prague who were Russian in origin, and most of the people who worked there were also Russians. Not all, but most. And it was very specific, it was like different than what you normally have in a company. I remember when we decided to actually integrate and act on the redundancy list, and they were threatening me at the time a little bit, so a couple of them. So when we actually had to do it, I took one or two of our drivers, the couriers of Dáme jídlo, who were like big guys, who were there with me in the room. So it was like simple enough to actually make it happen, and then nothing happened. But yeah, it's. I think open communication is and explaining the reasons. It's one of the keys. And like again, like as it is like capitalizing on the crisis, you need the right frame of mind that we are going to win it. Like in this situation also, like if you view the situation like people are let go and it's bad and I'm sad and everything goes to hell, then yeah, it's bad and sad and everything goes to hell. But you are not firing someone, you are keeping a job for someone else. Like people are still staying in the company, and like this is the same. You can view it this way. Like I'm saving the jobs of 200 people, not firing whatever amount. Like that's one thing to realize. And also, we are in the Czech Republic, in Prague. Everyone who wants a job will find it within 5 minutes if he wants to. And there is a social security system that's going to take care of everyone. So there is absolutely no trouble. It's just emotion that's hurt, and it's like we have to appreciate it and be respectful and everything. And I've always paid everyone what needs to be paid by law and the contracts. I've never tried to get out of that obligation because I think it's like right thing to do. Like when you have to execute the layoffs and someone needs to leave, like we at least needs to make sure that our obligations are met. And but then it happens, and like it's no big deal. People will have a new job within a couple of days if they want to.
Okay, no. You definitely did it several times. I can see that you're in peace with that. No, but
yeah, I remember like years back I saw a movie. I think
George Clooney.
George Clooney, that's the one.
That's what I've been thinking
Most
about.
of my like firing education comes from that movie.
By the way, you look like him a little bit.
Yeah. Thank you. I've never heard that I look like George Clooney. And most of like what I know about letting people go, it comes from that movie. And I like the way he handles that very calmly. And like it's because then you, I think, project part of that calm on the people. And when like both parties are crying, it doesn't help.
Okay, so we touched on employees, we touched on financials. Any other things that are important to pay attention to, in particular during tough times in the company?
I think it's this like suppliers and like business partners, the external world, and not only the customers whom we are trying to serve always the best, but like also like significant part of the cost goes to that suppliers and business partners, and like. That needs also to be like someone needs to take care and negotiate and talk openly to them. And it can be like tough. It can be like we need like, I know you've sent us the invoice for that amount, but we need to get a discount on that invoice that's already in our books. We need whatever, 20%, or we need a postponing a year or whatever. But you need to figure out what you need, and then you need to very nicely go there and ask and negotiate and be persistent. And it's tense. It's hard, but that's where the value is.
I agree with you, by the way. And Matt, how did you experience this?
I totally, like, it goes down to cash flow. Like we always had like, shit, we need to create cash flow. So why don't we move from a monthly to an annual subscription model and recontract everyone on that? So if you're not paying, we were super nice. We'd call you, we'd email you. No, we email you 3 times automatically and we will shut you off. And it sounds shitty, but we've reminded you 3 times in a nice way. And if you're not paying, unfortunately, you don't get our product. It's just the way it is. And it's hard because you have relationships with your customers, but they're supposed to pay you for a product. And at some point you need to take a stance and automate it. Don't have a person, like it's a waste of money to have a person managing it. Just automate the whole process so that it shuts off. So cash flow is really truly king in this situation. In
your case, but it was like everybody were experiencing the same thing, because the hotels were suffering as much as you were suffering.
Yeah.
So
and then I choose
like
myself.
Yeah.
So I choose myself, and I'm like, if you can't pay your bills, and we're clearly not on your priority list of suppliers, then that's okay. We will go a different direction. The challenge is, and I say this, we're the core system of the hotel. So it's easy for me to say this. Some of you run apps that may not be core, so you would not be able to put your foot down on it. So I realize that I'm in a different position than some companies.
With you, actually, you're dependent on them now. Actually, paying your supplier in time. It's because you're dealing with consumer.
Yeah, so we went to the suppliers and we started to ask, like during the, like when COVID came, like we decreased the revenue and all the retail in Europe shut down completely and only online players were working and to decrease the amount. So all the suppliers in the whole Europe or world, they had full warehouses of the stock and no one. And like the first thing that happened, like when we are going to cost cut, and we sent a letter to our suppliers that, we are probably not going to buy, or we are canceling the orders for this season. And like everyone else, all the retailers did the same. And after some time to still continue selling, then the complete downturn improved a little bit. So we were selling something, and if you made a discount, we are selling pretty well. And I remember we reapproached the suppliers and we said, all right, we are actually able to sell something, so we can like reinstate a couple of the orders that you have. We need a discount, 30, 50%. And because we are not keeping the money for ourselves, we are not buying a new car, we are passing that over to the customer. And it was better than nothing for them, so almost all of them did it. And they rescinded the products, and we paid significant discounts, and then it worked. And I remember one example, one case I wanted to mention, when shit hit the fan and it all went down, some journalist from Czech version of Forbes called someone, I don't know who, in our company, and started to get information what's happening inside. And he got a screenshot of some warehouse system where there was a queue, where it's supposed to be a queue of orders that the warehouse is about to dispatch. And the queue was empty because like the business went down and people were working, some of them there. So the queue was empty because they were managing to work on it. But he thought we have zero revenue because there's nothing. And he misinterpreted that, and he made an article in online version of Forbes that we have zero revenue, which wasn't the case at all. Like we had only 80%.
That's another type of crisis management.
We had minus 80. We had only minus 80%, not 100. But like the article was, we are at zero, and like I was really pissed. I was even trying to find out like who leaked the information. And like going through the logs of the phone calls and stuff like that, but we didn't find anyone. But then I like this saying in English that goes like, if life gives you lemons, make lemonade. And so I took this article from Forbes, and when we were starting for this, and we needed to get out of the rental contract for the offices, and we wanted to move to another location. And because there was a 6-month notice period, I didn't want to pay or stay 6 more months, and so I've sent them an email with this article in copy. Said, we are in deep shit. I need you to let us go immediately. We are going to pay 1 month extra, and then we are gone. Or you are going to refuse. We are going to stay, and we are not going to pay anything until the court decides the new right amount of rent. And they said, just go. So it actually helped, this article, like that's what part of the story.
Yeah. No, that's nice. That's a nice turnover. Let's take some questions from the audience. Did Zoot survive?
Sure, absolutely. You can go buy there something right now.
Okay. Pietro Filippi, by the way,
No, that one closed down, but we are trying to make something work in one location, then maybe scale.
Okay. That's for Matt. Do you consider pivoting to pure fintech business model?
Yeah, sometimes on a good day or on a bad day, I don't know. It's like the SaaS revenue is beautiful because it's beautiful margin business. So it's hard for me to go on a freemium model and then let the fintech run it. But it's definitely something we thought about. So we're going for SMB and mid-market, like that we're going upwards. But at some point when our product is good enough, we might want to tackle that small, like the tiny B2B market where we don't use people to onboard customers, and that's when you want to give the product away for free. The fintech is deeply built in, and it starts driving the fintech revenue. But for now, because we're targeting the enterprise segment, customers want to pay us because they want to, be able to kill me if I don't deliver the service. And if you're not charging enough, they think that there's something wrong with your product. So we actually end up increasing the pricing faster because they want to pay us a lot of money for it. It's nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. To Lukáš. Did you ever wanted to invest your time to build something, not solving crisis? Why did you left Zoot?
The company went out of the insolvency, and I know nothing about fashion. I understand margins and stock and negotiations, stuff like that. But a company needs someone who is better suited, or needed someone who is better suited, and now has a CEO that's way better suited to manage the company right now. Like all the thinking about how do we work with the influencers, or how we address TikTok, or how we when you look on the website, you need to understand is the collection actually looking good and fitting to our customers or not? And I'm not able to do that. I don't see it. And in the situation that we are now, we are extremely very small business, and I am equal with my business partner who had an online store for the past 10 years, and she understands the business and the product and so on. So it's a small business. We are like entrepreneurs, so we don't have to report to the investor or someone. And I like being my own boss, and we complement with a curriculum. So she's there for the fashion part and product part. I'm there for the numbers and lawyers and banks and so on.
Okay. The next question was about what is the name of the movie with George Clooney, and Nurlan actually answered, Up in the Air. So whoever asked that? And okay, so we don't have much time, but the two more questions that I wanted two more topics I wanted to touch on is going back to normal. And I think, Matt, it's actually for both of you. When did you realize that, okay, the business is now stable, going back to normal? And when you went back to normal, was it like, did you do it cautiously? It sounds to me like no, if I hear correctly so far, but it would be interesting to hear it from you.
I think last year when we saw a vaccine getting rolled out, we had certainty that our industry was going to bounce back. We're going to have a shitty winter, and then we're going to have a killer summer, which we're in the middle of. And that whole planned out really well. So August last year, we just started hiring recruiters. We're like, our business is going to bounce back. We need a team to support it. And right now with what we have, we can't. So in August last year, we started hiring recruiters, and it started accelerating. And now we hire...
Where did you get the money to hire all these people?
We actually got a convertible note from our existing investors. So we brought in about 12 million euros convertible note, because they felt the same. They had seen how we executed through the pandemic, and they're like, we want to give you more money. And we're like, no, we don't need money. But actually at that point, we're like, well, we'll take your money. And we had Salesforce invest in our business on a convertible as well. So we had enough money to burn and to speed up, because we wanted to be in the best position now. So we do move, we're quick at pivoting. Like, we've learned we can shut down fast, but we can also quickly rise to the occasion if we need to. And now business is great. So there's definitely a discussion. Should we be more careful in our hiring? And that's a very valid discussion that we're having. Pulling profitability forward means we need to really look at our cost base. What are, we're the LTV CAC discussion. Sorry, that's an acronym that we use a lot in our business. Our LTV to CAC, lifetime value to cost of acquisition, it's about 16:1 today. A typical SaaS business is 3:1. Like, that's a healthy number. So it's way too good. But our cost of acquisition is quite high. So we're trying to figure out what's the right balance so that we can burn cash on go-to-market and spending it on marketing and sales versus how long it takes us to earn that money back. And that's a good discussion to have. That's a healthy discussion where you're balancing all your metrics against each other, and that drives how you run the business versus let's just spend wildly and we'll figure it out down the line.
One more question. You raised money before COVID, and you mentioned that you're raising money. How different do you see the metrics based on which the investors are evaluating you?
So when you get to our size, we're doing 85 million annual recurring revenue at the moment. So when you get to that size, they will try and especially the US investors, they try and find comparable businesses on the public markets, especially in this time when there isn't that much competition for the business. So they will look for comparable business with SaaS and fintech business. There's a few. There's your Shopify, there's Toasts in the US, and then they basically take whatever that number is and they apply that multiplier to us. If you're smaller, you can still get away with your early stage, and that's the promise of the acceleration. But for us at this point, it's the public markets that drive a lot of it already.
Okay, yeah, in this case, I agree. If you're smaller, I guess my feeling is that companies are required to show harder facts than before. Potential is no longer enough. I mean, we're dealing mostly with early stage. I think that before you could raise money with a slide, today my feeling is that it's getting a bit harder. I don't know if it's going to continue this way. Maybe the status is that we are today, where there's a lot of unknown, people are actually being harder. Once it will start to clarify and people will be able, okay, even if there's a slowdown, they will be able to estimate how hard it is. Maybe it will be, it will come down, but actually it could be harder than what we expect, and then it's like even worse.
So I think there's a consensus around Mews that we are winning.
Yeah.
And we've come out on top of all of the cloud solutions, and that we've had enough interest. It's just not at the valuations that we liked. So I could easily have had 20 term sheets, but I didn't take them, and we now have about 4 term sheets left where we're happy with the valuation. Now we need to pick, and unfortunately the investors try and slot in really shitty conditions because it's their market now, right? So they can dictate the demands, and we're trying to get all of these crappy terms that investors are trying to jam into our term sheets out, and then that lowers the valuation. So that's the fight that we're in at the moment. But if you're the winning solution, you might actually be able to raise a really good round. If you're the number 2, it's harder.
No, but there is a realization of valuation. We see it in the stock market. I'm sure it's happening also when we don't see it. But it's definitely, this is a consequence of this slowdown we already see. And I think it will stay here for a few years. Yeah. Then it will, there are cycles. Like in 2008, there was a cycle, there was realization, and then it's picking up again. And now we're experiencing another cycle like that. Lukáš, the same question about going back to normal. When have you realized that Zoot is actually on a safe ground?
I think it goes down to cash flow or metrics like that, and that's the key parameter, I think, to watch for.
I was reading a question, so I was not listening to your answer.
Cash flow.
Sorry. Okay, cash
Bank
flow.
account.
Yeah. The question that we got, last question from the audience before we wrap up. Is the pandemic really over? I guess it's for you, Matt, because you have you feel the pulse. What if it will start again in autumn? It's a valid question because you've been hiring people, you've been spending.
It will be back in August, and I hope that you take your 4th shot whenever the government will allow it. I think they're very late with the planning of it, unfortunately, because that winter is coming faster than we think. There will be some resurgence for sure. I don't think it will be as harsh as last year when we had Omicron, but there will be some of it, and we'll see some of that impact, but we're not calculating it anymore. So we look at occupancy across hotels, and we always had like a 5 to 10% margin over the winter, and we've actually stripped it out of our budgets now because the resurgence is even stronger than we'd ever imagined, and there's this pent-up demand for travel, and we are hoping that will overcompensate some of the effects of the pandemic, but it's coming back, and get your 4th shot.
By the way, I get email every week from Israel saying you didn't get your 4th shot. Yeah, no, I will go there to do it because here it's not given. Just last.
But we are in the Czech Republic. I think it should be like get your 1st shot. I have 3 shots, so I'm on the good side. But and I think it's a good thing to have a shot. But I think in the society, like what people believe or don't believe, I think it's very, very fragmented and there's like 2 camps, that are fighting a lot, and one camp doesn't believe what the other camp says. So I think is going to be the source of friction, because it's definitely going back, like it's rising. I don't think the governments will shut down businesses. We have tried that, and it create more troubles now. So I don't think it's going to happen. I think they will force the masks, and they will, to some groups of people, force the shots.
I agree with you completely. I don't think we can take another pandemic in the meaning of the measurement that were taken before. We cannot. The market cannot take it. Last question, or what if you have to give the audience here one advice from your experience, one takeaway that you think they should go home with? What would be this takeaway? The one thing that is really important. Maybe I think, don't worry, be happy from you. I wonder what Matt says. You can think about it.
It's a slow creeping thing, this recession. And I think if you do anything, go and look at your budgets and plan out the worst case scenario, just so that you have a worst case scenario in mind. You don't have to action on it, but at some point you need to take a jump. And there is no pivotal moment in this pandemic, in this crisis like the pandemic had. It's a slow creeping thing. Just, if you do anything, pull up your budget and just say, let's work out the worst case scenario. Do that with your CFO. I hate doing budgets, but she's generally great at modeling out the different scenarios that you're going to go through, so that whenever your investors, or if you don't have an investment yet, it's important for you to understand, but know what your worst case scenario will look like.
Yeah, don't give up.